I'm Elex Michaelson. This week, the issue is impeachment. California Congressman Adam Schiff leading the impeachment inquiry. He's standing by to talk with us. Plus, Las Vegas is banning camping on the street. Is this a good idea? Is it legal? Could we see this in California? Talk about that and more with our panel. Gustavo Arellano, Jessica Levinson, and John Thomas. The Issue Is starts right now. And welcome to The Issue Is. I'm Elex Michaelson. Next week, Congress will host the first impeachment inquiry, the public hearings. Southern California Congressman Adam Schiff will be leading them. He, of course, is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman Schiff, welcome back to The Issue Is. You were our first guest on our first show, and we will always be grateful for that.
Thanks.
So we have these hearings next week. Republicans are asking for public hearings. You've announced that on Wednesday, we've got William Taylor and George Kent. On Friday, Marie Yovanovitch. Most Americans have never heard of those people before the last couple weeks. Who are they? Why do we care about them? And why are you picking them first?
Well, Ambassador Yovanovitch was the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, and she was the victim of a vicious smear campaign that was led by Rudy Giuliani and some of his allies in an effort to force her out of that position. Ultimately, she was recalled, and her successor, the charge d'affaires, is Ambassador Taylor, who the public will also hear from next week. He would become the top person in Ukraine. The top person in Washington with the portfolio of Ukraine was DAS, or Deputy Assistant Secretary Kent, who the public will also hear from next week. So you'll hear from the two top people on the ground in Ukraine, and you'll hear from the top person with that portfolio in Washington, D.C. And what they will describe, I think, is pretty consistent and consistently shocking. And that is that you had a regular foreign policy channel led by the career diplomats, and you had an irregular channel in which the president, Rudy Giuliani, and someone named Ambassador Sondland sought to get the Ukrainians to do political investigations that would help the president in his re-election campaign, and sought to coerce Ukraine into doing it by holding up hundreds of millions of dollars in military assistance they needed to fight off the Russians, and a meeting that the president of Ukraine desperately wanted at the White House with President Trump. So I think these three witnesses will lay out the broad story, the broad arc of the events of the last year, and chronicle much of the president's flagrant abuse of his office.
You know, Republicans have expressed a lot of frustration with you. The president calls you Shifty Shift. He says that you're a liar. The colleague, Kevin McCarthy, who's the top Republican in the House, he was on CBS's Face the Nation, and he was asked who he would want to call in an impeachment hearing, and he said you. Here's what he had to say, and then we'll get you to respond.
Well, I think the very first person we should bring Adam Schiff and his staff. He is the only individual in America
for a public hearing
who knows.
You want to question the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee?
Yes, I would, because he is the only person who knows who this whistleblower is. He refers to himself as a Ken Starr. Ken Starr testified. How many times did he meet with the whistleblower? What did he talk to the whistleblower about? Because when the whistleblower even went to the Inspector General, he never mentioned that he went with Adam Schiff.
So what's your response to that? And what was the nature of your relationship with the whistleblower before all of this?
Well, literally probably a dozen false statements. I couldn't keep track as I was listening to the clip by Kevin McCarthy. I've never met the whistleblower. I don't know who the whistleblower is. But you have to understand one thing about Kevin McCarthy. He has no independent judgment. He is merely the vessel for the president to act in the Congress. He does whatever the president wants, and he says whatever the president says. And that's, really, I think, a shame that you have a party leader in Congress so willing to debase themselves to this unethical president, but that's exactly what Kevin McCarthy does.
So you say you've never met the whistleblower at all. Do you know who the whistleblower is, though? You know the whistleblower's identity, right?
I do not, no. So all those statements you heard from Mr. McCarthy are just flat out false and wrong, but that's the kind of person Kevin McCarthy is, I'm afraid.
Wow. Okay, so what do you make, though, of the president's son and other Republicans now naming a person that they believe to be the whistleblower?
Well, look, there's been an effort by the Republicans, by the president and others to out this whistleblower, to punish this whistleblower, to bring about political retribution against this whistleblower. It's shameful. It's shameful. You have the president talking about how people that blow the whistle should be treated as we used to treat traitors and spies. That is, we used to give them the death penalty. So this is an attack on accountability. Now you can understand why the president wants to attack the whistleblower. He feels it's his God-given right to abuse his office in any way he wants, and anyone who essentially calls out that wrongdoing is a traitor, because he believes he is the state. That may be true of a monarchy. It is not true of the United States of America.
So we're less than a year away from the election now. Why not just let voters decide this? What's the point of doing this when there is no indication at all that 20 Republican senators are willing to convict the president?
Well, here's the problem, Elex. On the day after Bob Mueller came and testified before Congress, on the day after Bob Mueller set out how Donald Trump and the Trump campaign invited Russian interference in our election, made use of it in their campaign plan, lied about it, covered it up, and then obstructed the investigation into that misconduct. On the day after his testimony, Donald Trump was back on the phone, this time with a different world leader, this time with President Zelensky of Ukraine, seeking to have Ukraine interfere in the next election. Clearly, the lesson this president walked away from the whole Mueller investigation was he can't be indicted, he can't be impeached, he is above the law, he is above any accountability, and to leave a president with the idea, an unethical president with the idea that they are above the law is just too dangerous a prospect for the country.
I have a question just about you as a human being, right? Even getting away from the politics. You've got half the country, or 30% of the country, saying negative things about you, calling you a liar, talking about you in social media. You got the President of the United States bashing you almost every single day. On a human level, what does that feel like, and how do you deal with that?
Well, look, you know, I think, honestly, standing up to this president, calling out misconduct by the president or people around him is part of my duty. And I'm willing to take whatever comes with that. I just wish that my Republican colleagues had the courage to stand up to him also. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. It should be an issue about what's right for America, what kind of conduct we should expect in the President of the United States. This shouldn't be an issue of loyalty to party. This ought to be an issue of loyalty to country. But I realize, look, the president has got to go after me. He doesn't have Bob Mueller to go after. His acolytes are going to go after me. And so that segment that watches nothing but Fox Primetime, yes, they're going to have antipathy towards me. But I rest well knowing that when this chapter of history is written, it will reserve its most damning language for those that defended the actions of this immoral President of the United States.
And one more question. You're working so hard. The reports are you're like barely sleeping. What do you do to relax? How do you get away from this? How do you get a break? What do you do for fun?
Well, first of all, the rumors of my not getting enough sleep have less to do with not being able to sleep, more to do with just the schedule. But I get plenty of sleep, I'll have you know. In terms of what I do to relax, you know, I still just like going out to dinner and the movies with my family. I love going to the gym and working out, and that's going to be probably about it in terms of my recreation, at least for the near future. Yeah, you're a busy man. Well, you know what I like to do? I like to play Tupac. So we got a little California love for you, because I know you're in the capital, but you got California in your heart, right? Outstanding, absolutely. And you can always dance to Tupac if you want to on our show. Thank you very much. I don't think you want to see that. Adam Schiff, thank you very much. And thank you always for taking time to talk to us. It really means a lot to us. It's important to talk to your constituents. And we've made the same offer to his Republican colleagues, and we hope that they will take us up on it as well. Up next, a lot to unpack with our panel from what we just heard. We're going to talk about impeachment. We're talking about Prop 187, a lot of California issues. Stay with us. More of The Issue Is right after this.
All that matters is one thing, the transcript. and the transcript is perfect.
President Trump vowing to fight his impeachment inquiry. So far, Republicans seem to be behind him. But will it stay that way? Let's talk about that and more with our panel. John Thomas is back. He is the founder of TPS Strategies, host of the Thomas Guide podcast, and he's a commentator seen all over TV, including often on the Fox News channel. Jessica Levinson is a professor at Loyola Law School. She's also all over TV. This past week, she held a conference called Free Courts and the Free Press. Every one of your panelists are among my favorite people, almost all of them past panelists on the show, and of course my mentor Conan Nolan. Thanks for the invite. Gustavo Arellano is here for the first time. He's a columnist for the LA Times. Welcome. He's also host of a new podcast called This Is California, The Battle of 187. It is fantastic. Today's actually the 25th anniversary of Prop 187. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's begin though with impeachment. We just heard from Congressman Schiff. Let's get the Republican response from John Thomas. What do you expect from the impeachment hearings that are going to start this week?
I mean, look, it's become a circus, and I think Adam Schiff likes it and the Democrats like it because the longer that they can create this cloud of controversy, stretch this thing out, they keep the president's approval ratings down and the president off his re-election message of other things. So it was interesting to hear Schiff's response that despite there being zero path to actually get this confirmed in the Senate, instead of just censuring the president, going on record in the House, he's going to continue to go down this road. It's purely political, and that's the problem.
What did you make of that?
Well, this is going to shock you. I totally disagree with what you said. So, number one, I actually think this is terrible for Democrats that this is dragging on, because then the president can continue to say, why aren't House Democrats doing the work of the American people? Why do they keep this witch hunt going? And I think Democrats know that, and that's why they decided not to go to court for every time somebody ignores a subpoena. The other thing about, why are we going through this impeachment? Why not just censure, as you said? Because impeachment is in the Constitution. And if we still live in a government that is structured by the Constitution, then that word has got to mean something.
So you're willing to shut down the government, get no progress done on the important things that Democrats ran in on the midterms so that you can put a stamp on the Constitution.
I don't think we have to shut down the government. I think what you have to do is say, either we respect that term, and if we see this type of behavior that rises to impeachable offenses, we do it, or that term impeachment becomes meaningless.
Gustavo, what do you think?
I'm so tired of this impeachment talk. And if Trump did something wrong, if the Democrats think that they did something wrong, it's time to bring out the evidence. It's time to do all the hearings or whatnot. And same thing, if Trump's innocent, then he shouldn't be crying and whining and talking witch hunt and fake news. Just get on with the program. Americans are getting sick and tired of it, and both sides are using it to their own advantage for their constituents, and no one is in the middle actually saying, like, okay, let's all unite again.
So around the table, yes or no, do we believe that President Trump will be impeached in the House?
I think so, absolutely.
Yeah, without a question.
And does anybody think that President Trump will be convicted in the Senate?
No
Impossible.
way.
Okay. Now let's talk about the presidential race itself. Apparently getting another billionaire in this. Check out the net worth from Forbes. Mike Bloomberg at $52 billion. Donald Trump at $3.1 billion. Tom Steyer at $1.6 billion. They're all apparently running for president. What do we make of Jessica, of Mike Bloomberg's presidential run?
I think that, I think he just couldn't help himself. I mean, I think that he saw the candidates, he saw the political landscape, and he felt like he had to jump in.
But could it be him? Could he be the Democratic nominee?
I don't think so.
Gustavo, your friends and family, would they support Mike Bloomberg?
No, they don't care who Mike Bloomberg is. I care about him because I like Bloomberg News. That's it. Other than he's a billionaire, I don't care. He's not going to... I think the Democrats need a messiah, someone that people are going to rally around. And the problem that we're going through right now with this primary is that different people are being trotted out as a messiah, and none of them seem to be sticking. Not yet, at least. And Bloomberg's not going to be it.
You study the polls. What do you make of Bloomberg's chances?
Actually, I think he has a path, but I don't think he's going to be the nominee. There are two real impacts of this. First is this is great news for Elizabeth Warren. She has wanted to run against Wall Street since day one. Now you've got this mega Wall Street character. And the other is Joe Biden is having a terrible day. As Joe Biden was beginning to fall anyway, this is kind of the kiss of death. And he can just own that lane that Biden wanted to own. So I think that's the real impact. Can he win the nomination? We'll see.
All right, as we go to break, we're playing the OJs for love of money in honor of all the billionaires in this race. Up next, the proposition that completely reshaped California politics and continues to do so to this day. It's a fascinating conversation, and it's next.
Californians of all races and colors and creeds voted for 187 for fairness.
25 years ago, California passed Proposition 187 with nearly 60% of the vote. It prohibited illegal immigrants from using non-emergency health care, public education, and other services in California. It was eventually struck down as unconstitutional. It's really hurt the Republican Party in this state ever since. Gustavo Arellano, host of a new podcast called This is California, The Battle of 187. He's here to talk about it, along with Jessica Levinson and John Thomas. Gustavo, let's start with you. Sort of the big takeaway, because I think there's a lot of people watching that may not even remember Prop 187, or maybe weren't alive for that, how that really continues to shape California.
This one proposition that 59% of California voters approved in 1994 went on to turn California into the bluer than indigo state that we're at in Sacramento, but also paved the way for Donald Trump to enter the White House using anti-immigrant rhetoric.
And how did it do that?
They did it because, well, on the one hand, you had a generation of Latino voters who saw all the, the rhetoric used ostensibly about illegal immigration, but really coming off in xenophobic tones and saying, hey, you Republicans are going against my dad, against myself, against my uncles. I'm not going to go vote for Republicans ever again in California. On the other hand, the rest of the United States, anti-immigrant activists said, hey, if 187 passed so well, let's start replicating it in our states as well.
John, you run campaigns for a living. You look at the polling among Latinos in this state. You know the challenge for Republicans in this state. How much has this hurt Republicans, and how do Republicans sort of move on from it?
Well, it was poison at the time because it activated a demographic of voters that voting is a habitual thing. Once you start doing it, you don't stop. So it ignited, perhaps some say accelerated, a trend that might have already been coming as demographic shifts, and Republicans haven't recovered since. I think the conversation has to be shifted. We can have a conversation about illegal immigration in the border in California. Look, 77% of voters in Orange County, for instance, believe we have a crisis at the border, but the solution is not to demonize them. The solution is to deal with it.
I mean, I think the Republican Party is not, coming back in California. And I think that we could see, that old saying, as goes California, then the rest of the nation will go. But it's not necessarily the case that groups vote like monoliths or that any minority is just going to be a Democrat. So you have to look at which specific groups are growing in which states.
And Gustavo, I know you feel that a lot of Latinos actually identify in a lot of ways with the Republicans, especially social conservatives, right?
It didn't have to be this way. President Reagan passed the 86th amnesty. You had, for a couple years, my parents, they liked Ronald Reagan. Like, hey, he gave us amnesty. And then Republicans in California threw away all that goodwill with 187, and Trump is doing the same on a nationwide level with second-generation Latinos with his rhetoric.
Well, it is a really, really interesting podcast, and I hope everybody listens to it. We want to let you know that, well, first we want to play Salsa, which is your theme song from the podcast.
Yes, it's a good jam.
This is from Niña Dios. It's the theme song, and Gustavo is coming on our podcast to talk about his podcast. So we're going to be talking all things Prop 187. Check out all of that on the Issue Is podcast. Check out all of our past shows. Just search for The Issue Is wherever you stream. Up next, we're talking about something that Las Vegas is doing that could revolutionize homelessness. Stay with us. Las Vegas city officials passed a controversial law this week that makes it illegal to sleep or camp in downtown as long as there are beds open at the city's homeless shelters. So is this legal? Is this potentially a model that we could be seeing here in California? Back with our panel, Gustavo Arellano, John Thomas, Jessica Levinson. Jessica, as the law professor on our panel, is this legal?
So we don't know it yet. This is a great law professor answer, right? We have one case to look at. The Ninth Circuit ruled on a similar law that came out of Boise, Idaho. But in that case, it said you can't live on the street, period. And it didn't have the contingency that this law has, which says if there are beds that you could go to. And so the Ninth Circuit threw it out, and they said it's overbroad. You have to make sure that there are places people can go. This law was written specifically in response to that, saying, okay, only if there's some place that people can sleep.
What do we think? Is this a good idea, though?
Yeah, I mean, it beats what we're doing now, because the problem is you have people that are setting up permanent homes. This is not like, oh, I'm just going to spend the night on the street here. I mean, these are permanent encampments that people are building, and it only festers and grows.
Although part of the penalty for this is that you get a $1,000 fine. How are these people supposed to pay that?
It's whack-a-mole. So, okay, they're not going to be able to live in downtown Las Vegas. They're going to go next to Henderson. And after Henderson, they're going to go to Baker. And after that, like, and what's going to happen now, every city's going to pass it one by one, especially if it holds up. Where are all these people going to end up? There's not going to be any solving of the homelessness.
Because, yeah, you've got to fix the underlying problem of homelessness.
You need
mental health.
addiction, all
in
that
California,
stuff.
You've got to reduce the cost of living, cost of housing. I mean, it's a whole, I would argue, reduce taxes so that people can afford to actually invest in housing.
I was waiting for the moment when we disagreed. I was thinking, yes,
There's so many components to this problem. That's the challenge. Just one law alone is not going to do it.
Yeah. We end with some music from Dua Lipa. Don't Start Now. This is some new music. This is where you get to dance. It's your first time, Gustavo. We got to see your moves.
Right.
Thanks.
Good luck with that one.
Yeah, there we go. Thanks for watching The Issue Is. We'll see you next time.
I think, your best dancer is Gloria already.
Gloria is
every
the best dancer.
She just has